Lucas Middleton. What does one currently need to do in order to legally fly any RC aircraft, quad, plane, etc., over 250 grams recreationally? I assume you mean in the United States. It's the implication there. Let's see. Blunty, I know you know the answers, Blunty, because you work with the FPV Freedom Coalition, and you guys are heavily involved in the legalities of drone use in the USA. Let's see if I get it right, though, okay? You need to take the trust test and pass the trust test. And then if you're flying recreationally, you need to register with FAADroneZone.com, and you pay, I think it's like $5, and you get an FAA registration number that you put on all your aircraft. One registration for recreational. Put the number on your aircraft. It has to be printed on and like stuck on your aircraft. And then also you might want a remote ID module, although these days they have pushed back the requirement, the enforcement rather. The requirement is technically in effect, but they are not enforcing it yet. But if you wanted to like be fully like compliant, you would have a remote ID module, unless you were flying at a FRIA, which you probably would like. That's just like a traditional flight field that has been given authorization as a FRIA by the FAA. And then there are some legalities about like where you may fly, but I think that's probably not what you're asking about. Okay, how did I do, Blunty? Did I miss anything?
That was good. Two things. I think we should just not pretend like it was pushed back. Remote ID is active. Like the statement they put out repeatedly afterwards of the original statement was like, no, you still need to do this. If you can buy one, you should be ordering it. You should be putting it on your drone, that sort of thing. So I just want to be clear. We don't ever see enforcement, but as you're following all the other rules, I think remote ID is in the same class as getting your trust cert and doing these other things, if not more so. Because a Karen doesn't know about a trust cert, but they will know about remote ID when the news gets a hold of it. That would be my 2 cents on that.
Okay.
But the other thing you missed was you need to have a CBO in mind, and you need to have the CBO's rules available. So you can pick your CBO, doesn't matter. It could be FPV Freedom Coalition, it can be the AMA, it could be Flight Test Community Association, or STEM Plus C. Those are the 4 accepted CBOs. You just need to have reference to those documents, so you can have a link to our rules on your phone, something like that. You just need to be aware of them. Again, this is in a world where somebody's going to know to check these documents, and that's probably never going to happen. But if it is, this is one of the requirements.
So there's a world in which someone would say, hey, you, what CBO safety rules are you flying under? And you would say, I'm flying under the FPV Freedom Coalition rules. And then they would look those rules up and go, wait a minute, and ask you if you're in compliance with, because probably you're just out flying somewhere and you didn't even think about it. But if you wanted to be like fully compliant, you would have reviewed those rules and you would be flying in compliance with those rules.
You got it.
Yeah. Okay. You asked. Now you know the answer. FPV Dreamer Mike, thank you for a $5 super chat. Taking my rig and etc. abroad, what's the process with the batteries? Okay, FPV Dreamer Mike, the first thing is that each individual battery needs to be under 100 watt hours. That is probably the case for most FPV batteries. For example, a 5,000 milliamp hour 5S battery is just about, it's like 98 watt hours, 99 watt hours, something almost exactly. The way to do that math is you take the milliamp hours times 3.7 times the cell count, and that has to be less than 100. If it's more than 100, then it's going to be too much hassle to travel with the battery, and I would suggest finding another way to travel with smaller batteries. Most FPV batteries are under 100 watt hours by far, so it's not an issue. There is no restriction on the number of batteries, and the batteries should be in your carry-on bag, not your checked bag. Do not put lithium batteries in a checked bag, because if they light on fire in the cargo compartment, that's really, really bad. If they light on fire in the passenger compartment, it's also really bad, but it's at least somewhere where someone could try to do something about it. People say that the battery should be at storage charge. They're right, but I've never had anyone check that. People say that the batteries should have like individual caps on the XT60s. All that the actual regulation says is that the batteries must be protected from short circuiting, basically. I don't know the exact wording off the top of my head. And I would argue that an XT60 inherently is protected from short circuiting because of the design of the XT60 itself. Again, I've never had an issue with that. And then the other thing you should do is you should know that leaving the United States is going to be easy because all of the regulations I've told you are United States regulations, and the outgoing flight will basically comply with those. The airport is going to check you based on U.S. regulations. At least that's been my experience. I have had people, when I'm returning from a foreign country to America, question my batteries. And again, it's extremely rare. One time, I was flying out of Belgium, I'm pretty sure, and they were a little uncertain about the batteries, and I showed them on my phone the regulation, and then they had to find their local version of the regulation. And the number one thing I can tell you to do is whatever airline you're flying, if it's Air France, show them the Air France page about lithium batteries. Have it ready to go so you can say, look, I'm allowed to have these batteries. Be prepared for a little bit of delay, but it'll probably be no big deal. Two more things. Number one, some countries you're not allowed to bring drones into, like at all. Check the local requirements for drones and don't assume you'll be able to bring your drone with you. I don't think it's super common, but it is a thing that has happened. People show up and they're like, you can't bring that in our country. That's a prohibited item. And then what do you do? The other thing I would say is that like Stinger Swarm coming back from Mexico went through security and they said, you can't bring those batteries on the plane. And he said, yes, I can. Look, here's the printout and here's the regulation, blah, 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 blah. And they were like, nope, can't do it. And ultimately, he ended up throwing out all his batteries. So there's a chance that you'll just have somebody who decides to F you today, in which case there's not much you can do about it. Dreamfree FPV says in Australia, the 100 watt hour limit applies. It's the sum of all the batteries have to be under 100 watt hours. That's interesting, Dreamfree. I'm surprised to hear that. I've never, generally the regulations for airlines are fairly standardized the world over. And Australia is not exactly, not a sort of part of the global aviation community. I'm surprised to hear that. It makes me wonder if some agent misinterpreted the rule or misapplied it, but maybe you're right.